What is this top enjoyment? It's minus 20 degrees outside and it's snowing. And the underground hut that this man built, the temperature inside is 28 degrees, achieving a true sense of ice and snow outside the house. The house is warm as spring. A man named Knock. It's a public company in Pilworth. The chairperson is not interested in money, so he chose to settle in the wild for a while. After digging the ground, Knock hurried to the river to take a bath. So he goes back to the campsite and he cooks lunch because it's in the wild. So there is no complete set of tools. Knock chooses to boil directly with water. Take advantage of this effort. He installed the saw he brought. Then add a spoonful of sand with evaporated milk to the pot. Be sure to keep your hands steady when you put, otherwise the foam will be poured. After a simple meal, the time also came the next morning. Early riser Knock first cut a lot of logs, then transport them back to the camp one by one. But as you get older, Knock is no longer like a boy. It's been busy for less than half an hour. He was sitting on the ground, gasping for air. After a short break, Knock peeled the logs he brought back, and then it's over a campfire, and it's carbonized. These carbonized stakes will be buried in the foundation later. Before that, Knock first digs a hole deep enough. Then the carbonized stakes are buried in the pit. He buried a total of 5 stakes like this. 2 of them not only play a load-bearing role, it is still the reserve wooden house in port. After completion, Knock went to the forest and picked some logs. These logs, mainly used to build a workbench. This will make it much easier to handle wood. After the knock is settled, I started working on it immediately. He first peeled the logs that served as beams, and it's placed on the columns. The strokes are sized to make them firmer. Knock cleaves the card slot at both ends of the beam first, and then the collected cords are placed on the stakes. So, when the beam is placed on it, not only stable, it can also avoid the problem of air leakage in the gap. Finally, it is firmly nailed with a 10 centimeters nail. The safety factor of this wooden house, even if a tank hits it, it has to be sent to the repair shop. Bragging room. It rained again in the cloudy and changeable valley. Knock wanted to wait for the rain to let up before continuing to work, but he is impatient. In the end, I can't get rid of the changeable weather. Just like that, Knock withstood the heavy rain. Fixed all 3 beams under the tree, and he was cooking dinner under the tent. As a true Ukrainian, charcoal grilled meat is naturally essential. This morning, Knock went to the forest and collected a lot of logs, then used the wire brush of the dog's house to peel the log. And when it was done, he draped the tarp over the frame, ready to start building the wooden wall. But before that, Knock went to collect some turf first, and he spread it out neatly over the logs, and so on to get a complete wooden wall. After completion, Knock backfills the excavated soil. In this way, the lower half does not need to be fixed, and then he fixed some of the logs on it. The construction of the first wooden wall is complete, and Knock picked a lot of mushrooms. Simply cook a bite. After eating well, Knock follows the same method. Build a second wooden wall, except it's a bit laborious when moving the wood. Knock works without ambiguity at all, so he kept busy until late at night. After the wooden wall is built, Knock puts some logs on the hem of the ground, and they nail it down. Get a flatbed. In the blink of an eye, the next morning, Knock plans to eat some breakfast first to replenish his strength. The advantages of living in the wild. Just an endless supply of mushrooms. He took advantage of the time to boil water. Start building the 3rd single wooden wall, but different from before. Knock had a vent under the wooden wall. Otherwise, wait until the house is built. It takes half a day for a fart to dissipate. And when you're done, Knock backfills the gaps with dirt. Then match it with the rope you found. Create a simple measuring tool. Knock relies on this method. They're really good at cutting logs. It's just a little difficult to carry. He then peeled the logs. The roof is laid from one end of the frame to make it stronger. He specially prepared nails as long as chopsticks. Set one side first. Knock took out some woodworking boards. It's screwed into a square frame. Then he cut a slot in a log and nailed the square frame on. Finally, it is placed on the roof with a log. Get a panoramic skylight. After laying the rest with logs, Knock applies glass glue to the frame, then place the prepared glass on it. The installation of the sunroof is complete. Then he was on the side of the roof. Use a tin pen with its own hole. Draw the size of the chimney, and they saw through the roof. Get a place to put the shallots. And when it was done, Knock nailed it down. So the whole roof is done. After a day's work, Knock is going to have a good meal today. He sprinkled the fan-served steak with black pepper, then drizzle a little olive oil and spread evenly. Finally, place it on the grill and bake for half an hour. A happy day went by like this, in the blink of an eye. The next morning, Knock looks very cold. It must have been last night. The sudden cooling caught Knock off guard. He hastily cooked himself a pot of hot porridge. Warm up. After giving, Knock begins to build the missing section of the wooden wall. Since the roof is a triangular structure, so Knock needs to use logs of different lengths. After nailing it, Knock starts laying tarps with the Martin gun. This way the roof won't seep when it rains. Finally, cover it with some dirt. The service life of the tarp will also increase. Knock specifically enlisted the help of his fans today. They have a clear division of labor, one to peel logs and one to collect sod. And then Knock took the cut logs. Start building the last wooden wall. because you have to reserve a place here to go out. So this task is particularly time-consuming. It took them most of the day. I just finished building this wooden wall. With the conclusion of this task, it's getting dark. However, the two of them did not choose to rest, as you can imagine, to show everyone how serious they are. After transporting enough logs back from the forest, Nock will start preparing today's dinner. He used 3 wooden piers as shelves for the pots, then put the ingredients he brought into the pot and cook. Take advantage of the heating of the ingredients. He and his fans started installing heating fires. After inserting the shallots, fans can't wait to try the effect. The smoke looks very good from the outside, but just before they focus on the stove, the pot outside fell with a plop. Don't panic. Fortunately, the ingredients are not ready. Some ingredients in it. And go back to the house and get busy. After all, it's past 2 in the morning. They had to rib up the wooden bed they were sleeping on. After completion, the rice in the pot is almost cooked. The two of them chatted while eating. When fans say there is no salt in the meal, Nock smiled awkwardly. It was too dark. He treats sweet and sour as salt. But some food is better than starving. After eating, the two went outside to lay a waterproof film again. Otherwise, if it rains at night, this is going to be a pond in the morning. After dealing with this, they both went to sleep. Come the next morning, Nock and the fans went to the river to wash their faces first, then go back to the cabin, cut the tarp off the sunroof. Finally, secure the martin gun along the edge of the skylight, and then we cover the roof with sod. The construction of the wooden house is basically completed. This is the hardest working man I've ever seen in the wild. He not only builds houses fast enough, also has a rigorous heart. Even if you go out to buy supplies, he would bring the most expensive stove in the house. After reinstalling the stove, Nock wraps a circle of stones around the shallots outside. Otherwise, hot shallots are likely to set the turf on fire. Then he went looking for more stones. Put it in a circle around the stove on the horse, and when you're done, Nock follows the gap in the roof, sharpen both ends of the log, and then with the turf, we make the roof. It looks like a complete fit now. Can't find fault. Even in the absence of a door, the temperature in the house can reach more than 20 degrees, and Nock cut out a few planks. Getting ready to install a cover for the skylight on the roof, he first fixed a few planks with screws, and we saw off the excess. Finally, just installed to lotus leaves on the lid, and then it's fixed to the skylight. The job is done. As the twilight comes, and Nock comes back and starts cooking dinner. He sets the ingredients on the stove and heats them up, then adds some sauce and pour it. Boiling water for a delicious dinner. Then came the next morning. Waking up, Nock puts on thicker clothes. After all, at the end of autumn, it's cooler outside. He simply took a bite of breakfast first, then start digging at the door. He's going to build another earthwork here. After digging the pit, Nock dug another smoke pit. Then he spread the stones in the pit of the temple. This not only prevents the pit from collapsing, it effectively reflects heat. Then he took a plank of wood of the right size, covered on the exhaust channel, and backfill with soil. And you're done with an earthen grill. After these are done, Nock's stomach growled as well. He washed his hands and started to marinate pork belly, then sprinkle with chili noodles placed directly on the grill. 8 minutes later, Nock with bread and barbecue ended a day of life. As winter approaches, Nock is also working hard. He's going to finish the door today. After setting the door frame with cut wooden strips, Nock nailed it to the doorway. Although the size looks a little smaller, but I think it should shorten the construction period a lot. Then he took a few planks and started making wooden doors. After cutting it to size, Nock first applied structural glue to the edge of the board, then glued the planks together. Such a biting breeze won't go through the gap. To make it stronger, he also installed wooden slats on the back of the wooden door. And he goes outside and he puts lotus leaves on the door. After setting it firmly with screws, Nock cleans the floor at the door first, then install the wooden door again. In this way, the overall construction of the wooden house after it is done. Nock is going to show us his cooking skills. He put the sausages in the bottom of the pot first, then empty the potatoes, add some more cheese, then put the lid on and heat it in the soil stove. Half an hour later, an unknown delicacy is out of the pot. Hey, not half a year ago, in the blink of an eye. The next morning, Locke gets up to work before dawn. He installed thermal insulation cotton in the gap of the wooden door. The temperature generated by the furnace, it will better bring warmth to the wooden house. And he went and found a crook branch, then fixed it to the door with screws. You get an artistic doorknob. After completion, Nock started cooking today's breakfast. He gave himself for stalls first, then I brewed a cup of Banlangen to prevent colds. At this moment, in a great mood, he carried the glass out of the house. I felt like I was in Pilworth. The days of being the chairperson are not so happy. After eating and drinking, Nock removes the simple wooden bed, then clear the soil on the ground, because he's going to lay a floor in his house today. After measuring the size with a ruler, Nock peeled the logs he had collected and cut the size. This inexhaustible log, making Nock do the work, is very handy. He was laying down the logs. They backfill it with dirt, but halfway through the laying, Nock replaced the logs with planks. After all, not much space still need to be secreted by Jingwei. After reinstalling the wooden bed, Knock boarded up the rest of the floor. See here, there will definitely be friends who are curious. Where did these planks come from? Of course, it was sought out by Knock little by little. And then we're done. Hungry, he set about preparing dinner. Considering that my stomach is too hungry, so Knock can be as simple as it is. He fried the cut beef first and then I cracked a few more stupid eggs on it. Finished with a sprinkle of salt and black pepper. Happy end to a beautiful day. I didn't expect it to take only one night. It snowed heavily in Ukraine. Although the temperature outside is very low at this time, Knock still can't help but get out of the house. It was silly at first. Then he cleared the snow from the door, ready to perfect the last few floors together. But then, an accident happened. Knock, who was hit on the head, stung very much. He lay in bed and rested for 4 hours. He has a good temper. If this is a small editor, I have to hammer that piece of wood to smithereens. When he wakes up, he plans to cook lunch for himself first. It's really not cost-effective not to eat stewed food. After he cut the meat, he first fried it in a pan. Finally, add some melted butter. And then you put the chopped potatoes. Half an hour later, the delicious stewed beef is out of the pot. After Knock finished eating, he started to get busy. He built a staircase at the door out of planks. After all, as the temperature gets colder and the bloated padded jacket makes it inconvenient for him to enter with the help of nails and a chainsaw, Knock finished the job quickly. Then he came to the river not far away, cut through the frozen river with an axe. After estimating the thickness of the ice surface, Knock plans to go home tomorrow morning to replace his equipment. But before that, he still needs to stay here for one night. Wait until you return to the shelter. He began to prepare firewood for the night. The frozen wood looks really hard. Knock had to use an axe instead, but with the clothes on. He thought of being smashed on the head in the morning. So Knock adhered to the principle of tit for tat. Put a belly of resentment on the innocent wood. After completion, Knock placed the firewood neatly under the steps. And he made dinner. Fell asleep. In the blink of an eye. The next morning, Knock went home and changed into a brand new padded jacket. Shows up dragging his fishing gear. In the cabin, after a short break, Knock dragged the trolley to the river. He first cut a hole in the ice, then quietly wait for the fish to take the bait. But half an hour passed. There was no reaction at all under the ice. Knock thought it was a bad fishing position at first, and he moved to another place, and he waited. Finally, he was furious. I think the bait is too big. The fish can't bite. But even after changing the bait, Knock still got nothing. In the end, he could only end up in the Air Force. But I didn't expect there to be unexpected gains before leaving. That is to step on the air and with the socks. But when he took the fireflies out of his clothes, I have to wonder again, is this a link arranged by Knock? After starting the bonfire, Knock puts the soaked shoes aside to bake. Then he took out another piece of pork belly. This must not be baked. Comes with a fat and smelly foot taste. But Knock didn't care and ate with relish. The shoes that are soaked after eating are completely dry. Knock made a final struggle before leaving. But the result was obvious. Knock got up early today according to his daily routine. I brewed myself a cup of Banlangen first. He then went outside to enjoy the beautiful scenery of nature. 5 minutes later, Knock dressed up and started his day at work. He split the two planks in half. We're going to set up a table with them. Wait until the size is cut. Knock fixed the sides of the board with nails. It is not difficult to see from the size of this nail alone. The finished desktop will be different after nailing it firmly. Knock uses a chainsaw to cut off the excess, and you sweep the sawdust away with your elbow. Then you can install it next. After Knock marked the appropriate position on the wall, he uses a plank as a surface, then installed to lotus leaves on the table. Then it can be fixed directly to the wooden board. As for the table legs for support, and what he did was he made two appropriate sticks. A table that's removable is complete. Let's praise him together. Then Knock looked at the environment at home with satisfaction, but now he found the wooden bed at home looks a little shaky, and he did it all the time. Just sleep for the night. In the blink of an eye, the next morning, the snow outside is melted in part. But this weather is particularly cold. He quickly fed the stove with more firewood. After a short break, Knock, who pays attention to health, I had no choice but to take out wild instant noodles. After all, a nutritious breakfast will bring enough energy for a day's work. After eating, Knock removes the wooden bed in the house, and he took it and he went into the forest and he cut the logs. This powerful chainsaw, making it easier for Knock to do his job. Soon he had enough wood. Knock secures it with Martin after putting it down. The purpose of this, of course, to make it easier to cut the wooden from the skilled movement. It's not been a day or two since Knock dissected wood, after he split the log in half, cut off the excess according to the length of the bed. In order to make the wooden bed sleep more smoothly, Knock cut the card slot on the back of the board. The wooden bed built in this way is not only when shaking, it doesn't make a creaking sound. And when it's done, Knock lifts the bunker outside. Fire. After all, the rare sunny day made him a lot more comfortable. So, he's going to cook outside today. After cooling the iron pan, Knock roasting pork belly, while stir-frying vegetables in an iron pan. When the pork belly is almost baked here, he spread pork belly over the vegetables, then sprinkled the prepared rice on it. Finally, add some water and crushed peanuts. After waiting like this for an hour, the delicious pork belly rice is out of the pot. With the arrival of spring, the snow in the forest has completely melted. Knock who lived in the wild, also went back to his home. When he returns to the shelter again, he also brought a fan friend who was attracted to him, for nothing else, just to have someone to help him work. After unloading the carry-on bag, and they just swung this axe, and they just kept rubbing at the wood. After all, fans don't sleep well at night. It's all because the wood is slippery or not. After laying it, Nock led the fans to collect turf again, considering that it is rare for someone to help. So Nock decided to do some landscaping around the house. After they finished greening the soil slope, it looks really good. This is at least the specification of a second Drank Master. Finish these trivia. The owner of the house began to warmly entertain his fans. Sprinkle a 1 kilogram piece of pork belly with salt and bacon. Nock wrapped it in tinfoil and put it in an earth stove to heat it up. Considering that both of them have a large appetite, so Nock prepared charcoal roasted pickles. After waiting for half an hour, a delicious charcoal grilled pork chop is ready. You to bite me. Ended a tiring day. In the blink of an eye, the next morning, fan faces can't even afford to. Nock was called to work. He first planted the fruit trees at the door, then collaborate with fans. Use treated logs set many humanoid frames, and the frames just need to move one place. And a chainsaw cuts away the excess. A simple outdoor woodshed is made, in order to make it waterproof, and they covered it with turf again. No matter how hard it rains, Locke can also use dry firewood. This is Nock alone in the wild, because last year on National Day, the company is not on vacation, so he quit his boss in a fit of rage, carrying a bag to the wildlife. After Nock woke up today, prepare breakfast for yourself first. He threw the goosebumps sent by the fans into the pot to heat up. Then it was quickly filled with canned food. After eating, he skillfully went to the side to dig the soil and took a lot of stones from the ground. These stones will come into play later. But Nock now encountered a difficult problem. There are ants in the dirt. Bite his butt down the warehouse. The hopeless poker. We have to go to the river to solve this problem first. When he was done, he went back to the shelter to rest for a while. When he woke up again, it's raining heavily outside. The atmosphere looks so comfortable. I really want to kick him out and live in it myself. If you catch another wild woman, you drive me away. I don't want After the rain outside the window, Locke is setting up a bonfire outside. After all, if he did any barbecue for one meal, his heart itching even when it rains from the sky. He also wants to put a lid on the barbecue, and he has always paid attention to healthcare. I have to fry for eggs myself. Finally, it is paired with a cup of hope to prevent colds. Ended a day of doing nothing. In the blink of an eye, came to noon the next day. Nock picks up a stick of charcoal from outside. He uses this charcoal, draw a wheel on the floor, then remove these floors. Then take it to an external saw and cut it along the mark. You end up with 3 separate floors. As for the purpose of doing this, it's Nock, considering the hotter and hotter weather, but the temperature inside the house is more than 10 degrees lower than outdoors. So he's going to make a natural freezer under the floor. Such items are not convenient for long-term storage, can be placed in it. Get natural protection. After completion, Locke's stomach also growled. He made a simple lunch of eggs and ham. Then take advantage of the heating of the ingredients. He made his favorite cup of coffee on the stove. 5 minutes later, Locke walked out of the house with his bowls and chopsticks. He was admiring the beauty of nature, eating delicious food. This life is for others to see. I really want to kick him out and live by himself. After Nock woke up today, it feels like the stove at home has lowered his grade, so he threw away the stove that had accompanied him all winter, ready to build a fireplace out of stone and clay. After clearing the stones on the ground, Nock leveled the ground with a small shovel. He pursues perfection. Don't forget to use a rolling pin to compact the soil. After completion, he placed the iron frame of the fireplace, then surrounded him with stones and clay, in the shape of a fireplace. But that doesn't look pretty either. But I'm sure Nock did his best. Sweating profusely, he sat directly on the ground. Fortunately, there are natural refrigerators. Let him drink ice-cold mountain spring water. After a short break, Nock brought a lot of firewood from outside the house. He set the painted fireplace on fire. This not only allows you to visualize the smoke exhaust effect, it also accelerates clay condensation. After making sure there is nothing wrong, Nock raised his big toe in satisfaction. Then he lay leisurely on the bed and read a book, although living alone in the wild. But he hasn't got a wife yet. I follow the strategy of flirting with girls every day before going to bed. So he fell asleep. When I opened my eyes, it was the morning of the next day. He still got up early today. I found a flower in front of my house. He ate the mushrooms that want to lie on the board. He simply stroked it. Then he turned and went to the forest to find the right wood. Not for a while, a fallen tree caught his eye. He peeled the skin out of it and used a sentence to remove a knot. Wait until you get back to the camp. He's going to use this log. Make a workbench first. After splitting the card slot at the bottom with an axe, Nock twisted it and pressed it tightly on the shelf. This will effectively prevent the log from spinning back and forth. Then he used the leopard to flatten the side of the log, then cut a groove in the position of the play. After a simple trim, the workbench is made. Some friends will definitely be curious when they see this. What are you going to do with all this effort? Then let me show you in a sketch. He carved the wood in the shape of a cup. I think everyone should understand his intention. After digging a groove to bend out the bottom of the cup, Locke uses a saw to cut along the edge. Then he hacked away the excess with an axe. As for the rest, It requires patient engraving. So he goes into a state of selflessness. Although it has started to rain outside, he's still addicted to it. After all, there is such a gift to give to an unforgettable girlfriend. Cute little girls usually blush. And when he was done, Nock went back into the house and waited for the weather will change from cloudy to sunny in about 5 minutes. Granny Sun also shines the sun on the earth. Nock also came outside the house, prepared dinner. He went to the jungle and gathered a mushroom first, and then with beef and potatoes and onions. Let's stir fry it briefly on the campfire first. After the ingredients are about medium rare, he transferred it to a small clay pot. Then add water to cover the ingredients. Put it in the earth stove and cook. Finally, he made it before the night fell, and we had this delicious pot stew. Well, after Nock woke up today, bind the loose branches in front of the door into an Asian bundle. Then he began to prepare for the winter. After all, winters in Ukraine are surprisingly fast. But before that, Nock decided, dig yourself an underground treasure hole outside the house. Because he recently discovered someone took advantage of his absence, took his things without permission. This made Nock feel very sick. Use a small shovel to dig the soil hole first. Nock went to the forest and collected logs. He stops the logs at the required length. Then nail out a frame. And then we fasten the cut logs. A simple safe is complete. And Nock puts a lid on it, considering that the ground may be wet. So he built the bottom with stones. After completion, the sky outside was getting dark. Nock after a busy day. I fell asleep after dinner. In the blink of an eye, the next morning, he pays attention to health. Brew yourself a cup of coffee every day. It will last longer when you work like this. Then he went to a place 10 miles around Paris, collected a lot of turf. When these sods are covered to the ground, treasure box made yesterday, instantly merged with nature. If I hadn't seen it in advance, I really can't see that there are mysteries hidden underground. After completion, Nock removes all the floors in the house. Then use a wire brush to clean the dust from the wooden board. After all, a good home environment to satisfy the Nock of the single aristocrat. But then he discovered a new problem. It was the lid on the skylight. With the rain initializing, it's starting to get fragmented. He can't help it. Had to spend half a day. Build a new one from newly cut planks. And when it was done, Nock took the walk to the river to get water. But who knew he couldn't hold back? Just dive right into the water, cheerful like a 100 kilograms mermaid. So he went home and he redid the floor. But then it occurred to him, we don't even have a shelf in our house. So he used a hole punch, drilled the holes above the head of the bed. After inserting the sharpened wooden nail, he went outside and slotted the board. Then aligned the card slot and placed the board horizontally on the nail. And it's made out of this. After completion, Nock also dislikes this table for being a little underpriced. It looks really crumpled and unsightly. So he just demolished it without saying a word. Simply, he chose a flatter board this time. After nailing it, Nock installed some lotus leaves on one side of the table, then screw the table back into place. So that's the end of a busy day. Finally, in order to compensate for the tired body, while cooking dinner, to different origins were specially added, cooking potatoes, although the ingredients look simple. But the most helpful thing is just the fireworks in this world. After Nock woke up today, empty all the surroundings of the earth stove. He first inserted a wooden nail into the clearing. Then measure the position of the next wooden nail with your foot, until all 4 wooden nails are inserted. The size profile of the sauna room has changed. Subsequently, he declared himself to the emperor in a pious manner. When the first shovel goes down, I knew the soil was good for digging, so it didn't take Nock long. After he dug the foundation, turn around and go into the collected logs of the right size. Wait for the last return trip. He grabbed a rub of Yunchen liquid. It's a great way to make tea in the wild. So he was a little thirsty. Before the night comes, cook myself dinner, considering that it's all manual work these days. So he prepared beef wrapped in potatoes. After eating and drinking, after a hard day, he fell asleep beautifully in the blink of an eye. The next morning, he is used to getting up early. Get up at 7 o'clock to get ready for work. Anyone who is familiar with milk knows it. He has to have a drink every day before work starts. Otherwise, it won't work all day. And then we're done. Nock peeled the logs in the courtyard with an axe. And he made a bonfire. I made a partial fuse for the log. This is not only moisture-proof, but also durable. Take advantage of this effort. Nock first uses a shovel in 6 directions of the foundation. Dig out the pit where the wooden piles are buried. But Yin, the changeable weather always seemed to be against him. It was a blink of an eye, and it began to rain. Nock still chose to insist on getting the job done. After digging the pit, he buried 6 wooden piles separately into the foundation, then backfill with soil, compact with your feet. So the 6 columns of the sauna are completed, considering that the space doesn't need to be too large. So Nock used his shoulders to stroke the height of the wood. Use your own brain to draw stains. The extra part is directly cut off with the saw. After completion, Nock will be used as a measuring log to chop out the card slot, then at the junction of the beam and the column. Later, go like this. There will be no gaps in the build framework. And then there's the old-fashioned way. Build wooden walls, but a little different than before. The wooden walls this time will use a lot of turf. After all, a sauna is a closed environment. Go 10 miles away. After collecting enough turf, Nock very carefully started to build the wooden wall with the help of a good friend. The two spent half a day working hard, almost perfecting the wooden wall. But the cloudy and changeable weather suddenly began to rain. although the temperature in Ukraine is only around 10 degrees. But Nock doesn't speak, and his friends don't dare to stop. Otherwise, this wilderness. What if Nock goes berserk and beats a friend, and neither of them said a word? Pretend it's not raining. Just like that, more than an hour later, the clouds dissipated before they were finished. At this time, Nock also put down the tools in his hand. Show your friend with your eyes that you can rest. After Nock woke up today, he went to pick some small mushrooms with a bamboo basket, then used the iron pan as the container, filled with fresh wild blueberries. Look at the harvest of this basket. Satisfied, Nock bounces back home. He washed the mushrooms with water first. Then he took a big pot and blanched the mushrooms. Then he suddenly remembered. I saw a lot of wild pears on the ground not long ago. So he relied on his memory, found the place to pee that day. Then many were collected from the earth. And I went home. Nock cuts the wild pear in half first, then wash carefully with water. When he feels clean enough, you can add a lot of white sugar for pickling. Take advantage of this effort. He scooped up mushrooms that had been blanched, then pour out the turbid boiling water. After all, things that grow in mud, only after cleaning. It will make you feel more at ease. So, he refilled the pot. I plan to cook the blanched mushrooms again. This time, he put some incense in the pot, and sterilized the jars with water vapor. Half an hour later, Nock picked up the cooked mushrooms, filled with for jars. So he goes back inside. Heat blueberries and wild pears in the fireplace. When the pulp has been fully cooked, Nock seals with jars, and took the opportunity to steal a bite. It tastes very good. After a short break, Nock noticed that it was raining outside the house, so he made himself a cup of hot tea. It's nice to go outside. He has always been very enthusiastic, even through the camera. Also say hello to the fans in front of the screen. Out of politeness, the editor raised a teacup in response to him, but I didn't expect a crisp voice to come. I thought it was time travel. I didn't expect to break the screen by myself. This is what Nock pressed today. Woke up in the morning to cut a lot of wood. Completed the roof of the sauna, and he puts on a tarp that's big enough. Covered the roof with a lot of dirt. The advantage of this approach is that it is very discreet for better effect. He spends a lot of moss on the roof. This way you can avoid being fried when taking a sauna. Satisfied, he went back inside. Immediately dissatisfied, because he found out the fireplace that was built is falling apart. Just remove it directly. Put on the stove a friend gave a few months ago. Here he tried to prevent the wooden wall from being ignited by the high temperature. The side of the stove was insulated with stones. With such measures, Nock living alone, to live to see the sun tomorrow. And he cleaned everything up in the house. Chopped firewood to make a fire and cook, due to living in the wild. So it was conditioned. He can only eat simple food, sliced potatoes and onions. Put it in the pot and stir fry for 7 or 8 minutes. Nock took up a little bacon at home. In a state of hunger, I waited another 17 or 18 minutes. When it came out of the pot, he couldn't help but smell it. Then stir with a spoon. Don't forget to add mood to yourself when eating. So simple after a meal. Nock leisurely leaned on the bedside to read a book, but it didn't take long for him to fall asleep tired. Come the next morning, he gets up early and makes a cup of coffee.